Sending the warrant. Once the judge signs the warrant, we need to get it to the carrier. We will need to prepare the packet to send to the carrier and decide on the method of delivery. All carriers will receive the records by fax or mail, but some have more efficient platforms for law enforcement. Once we have sent the warrant, we need to track the progress to make sure we receive the records in a reasonable time. In this module, we will cover preparing the packet, sending the packet, and warrant tracking. Preparing the packet. We need to consider what we will send to the carrier. Obviously, the carrier will need a copy of the search warrant, but they probably won't need a copy of the affidavit. In fact, sending a copy of the affidavit to the carrier is discouraged. The affidavit will likely contain sensitive information, especially if the warrant is sealed, and there is no reason for the carrier to have a copy of it. The packet will have three parts: the fax cover, the warrant, and the affidavit of custodian of records. The fax cover. Use your department's fax cover. The notes section of the fax cover gives us the opportunity to send special instructions not necessarily included in the warrant. Again, request the records in digital format. Request the analyst email the records and follow up by mailing a CD containing the records and signed in marker by the analyst along with a notarized affidavit of custodian of records so that we can receive the records by email quickly and start working on them. Then we later receive the original CD and affidavit, which will be admissible in court. Also request the records be provided in digital format exportable into Excel. AT&T provides digital records in the form of PDF and text files. The text files work with Excel, but the PDF files do not. We want to make sure we can open the provided files in Excel. Here's an example of the fax cover that I've used in the past. The fax cover includes a section for notes, and here's the language that I've used to help me get the records that I need. Again, when sending the packet, send only the warrant signed by the judge. Sending the affidavit is not only not necessary, but it may also be a bad idea. The carrier needs only the legal demand to send the records. They don't need to know the details of the case. Sensitive information may be contained in the affidavit, especially if the warrant is sealed. Though the carriers would likely keep the information confidential, sending the affidavit to the carriers may put our cases at unnecessary risk. Include an affidavit of custodian of business records with the packet. Some jurisdictions require the records to be certified to have them admitted as evidence. If the records are not certified, the courts may require a representative from the carrier to testify to the accuracy of the records. Obtaining a notarized affidavit of custodian of business records is far easier and cheaper than coordinating with the carrier to have a representative testify. This is an example of an affidavit of custodian of business records that works in Indiana courts. Your prosecutor or district attorney should have an affidavit of custodian of business records that works for your jurisdiction. It should be easily adapted to phone records while maintaining the elements required by your jurisdiction. Most of the carriers have affidavits, but they may not meet the elements. An example is that AT&T's affidavit does not meet the elements required by the state of Indiana. If we provide our own affidavit along with a search warrant and request the carrier use it, we should receive an affidavit that will allow us to admit the records as evidence without having to have a representative of the carrier testify. Sending the packet. All of the major carriers will receive the warrant by fax. The fax numbers as of 2017 are listed here. In addition to faxing the warrant, Sprint and Verizon have law enforcement portals. These are web-based portals that allow us to submit the warrants without having to fax them. When submitting a case, the portals require us to select the information and date range for the warrant. Using the portals cuts the turnaround time. When a carrier receives a warrant by fax, an employee must enter the information into the system. As you can imagine, each carrier has a heavy workload. By taking a few minutes to enter the information and submit a scanned copy of the warrant packet, we are lightening the workload on the carrier, and our warrants don't need to wait in line to have an analyst at the carrier enter the information. The carrier will send us an email when the records are ready. Then we can log on to the portal and download the records. As an example, the wait time for Verizon records is about 2 weeks. Using Verizon's portal, I have received the records the same day I made the request. Law enforcement officers can call the numbers listed here to set up accounts. Unfortunately, accounts are not available for civil cases. Warrant tracking. Once we have a few successful cases using cell phone records, our services will become highly demanded. We will likely be writing a high volume of search warrants. Keeping track of which records have come in and which are still out without a tracking document will become nearly impossible once the volume reaches a certain level. Establishing a tracking mechanism from the start will help keep the cases organized as the volume grows. I use a simple spreadsheet to track the warrants. Here's an example of the tracking worksheet that I use. In column A is the target number. Column B is the type, such as a phone record or device exam. Column C is the phone company. Column D is the target name if known. Column E is the case number. Column F is the lead detective. Column G is the information I'm looking for, such as call detail records, text messages, cell tower locations, etc. Column H is the date signed by the judge. Column I is the name of the judge. Column J is the court that I had the warrant signed. This may be different from the court that actually hears the case. Column K is the date that I faxed or uploaded the records to the carrier. Column L is the date that I received the records from the phone company. This is the date that I use as served on the search warrant return. Column M is the date the return was filed. Column N is the carrier's case number. Column O is the case type. And column P is left for notes. While tracking a high volume of warrants, we will likely identify records where the carrier doesn't respond within a reasonable time. We may need to call the carrier to remind them of the warrant or learn the reason for the delay. So what's a reasonable time? That will vary by the carrier. Verizon usually returns the records within a few weeks of receiving the warrant. However, a few months may pass before T-Mobile sends the records. A reasonable time may also vary by the time of year. More crimes occur in the summer months than winter months, and carriers have more warrants in the summer. It may take longer to get the records during summer months.